Hello, hello. Welcome back to the Workbook for Students of A Course in Miracles. And we're on a really fabulous lesson today. Lesson 184. The name of God is my inheritance. How about that? The name of God is my inheritance. Now, we think of inheritance in many different ways here in the world. Naturally, we think of receiving something when a loved one, maybe our parents, passes away, right? Receiving a gift somehow, and we think of it in terms of material things. Now, we also think of it as cultural traditions, a long inheritance. Some of them are tremendously valuable to us in the world and give life a lot of meaning. There's a sense of community that comes from those, and there are many that are completely unhelpful. As we all know, what we're doing, after all, on the spiritual path is undoing all of the conditioning that was foisted upon us when we were young kids. Nothing more, nothing less, right? We're undoing all of that. So, in this case, inheritance means who we really are. And we're going to talk for a few minutes about names. The workbook does this in the commentary for today's lesson. We go by many names in the world, don't we? I have a name, that's Tomas. What is that, actually? It's a collection of sounds. Your name, whatever that may be, is a collection of sounds that we've all gotten together and agreed represents you. Who's you? Who or what do these sounds represent? This is the inquiry of spiritual practice. My parents could have named me anything. They could have named me Jeff or Blake or Miguel or something, but they didn't. And each of us has a name in the world. It is what it is, right? We become attached to our name. We associate it with this thing that you see here talking to you, the physical body, in other words. And what we do is we define and defend personal territory with our own name. We use it to refer to ourselves. And what happens is we emphasize the space that appears to be in between us. You have your name, I have my name. We're separate. That's what we grow up believing. And it is an ingrained habit that we're in the process with this course of undoing. Now, whether you follow this course as a primary component of your spiritual practice or not doesn't matter, because all spiritual practice aims to do the same thing. It can obviously dress it up in different ways and have different rituals and say different things, but we're all headed to the same place. It's not a place at all, of course, but everything is converging. Why? Because the only reality that is oneness and unity, not the millions of different names, billions, well, 7 billion different names, right, that we call ourselves. Even if you have the same name as someone else, we still emphasize space between us. We separate, in other words, and emphasize the distance when we should see it differently, but we don't. And what all of this separation is quite the opposite of wholeness. And that's reality, as we know from studying this material. And perhaps you've had a handful or more experiences of this. And perhaps you haven't, you will. You will. Whether you've had blinding flashes of light or blissful experiences doesn't matter at this point. Many of you have, many of you have not, and that's okay, because we're all headed in spirituality for the same place. And again, I emphasize it's not a place at all. All of this subdividing and naming ourselves different things, naming people other things. We go by many different names and titles, don't we, in our lifetime? That is, like it or not, the enemy of wholeness. The workbook says this, and it's true. That's the way that this actually operates. Now, it doesn't mean that we're necessarily consciously out to attack wholeness, that we're out to attack and subdivide unity. Yet our blind adherence to this thought system, in other words, the thought system of the ego, creates all this for us, sets us up to continue to do the same thing over and over and over again until we begin to ask the question, why? Why are we doing this? Why am I doing this? Because I know deep down, I feel deep down in my heart, in my gut, there is a better way. And sure enough, there is. There is. The two thought systems, you can only have complete adherence to one. You can't actually have adherence to both the thought system of the ego and the thought system of the Holy Spirit. This is a choice that we make. We get to make this moment by moment. The more we choose the Holy Spirit's thought system, the more we see just how off base the ego's thought system really is. Just how it's confusing and how it gets everything completely backwards. At this point, you may have had some experiences and some thoughts of realizing, oh, wow, so we have things exactly the opposite of the way they are. We consider truth, in other words, our wholeness, our oneness, to be insanity. And people get attacked. Think of history. People have been burned at the stake and stoned and condemned for expressing viewpoints just like the one that I'm expressing right now, just like the one that Jesus sets out in A Course in Miracles. We're very fortunate right now in the 21st century that most of us are not going to, some of us may, right? But most of us are not going to suffer that fate. However, people will probably think you're nuts. We've got it backwards. We consider truth insanity. This is what happens when we blindly accept the world's limitations. So to call yourself by your given name is not actually your real name. So what is your real name? Well, the name of God. The name of God is your inheritance. The name of God is your name. We saw this in lesson 183 in the last video. And we emphasize this again, we re-emphasize that the name of God and your name are one. There is only oneness. There is only wholeness. There is no separation of any kind. All separation that we make up in this world with our different names, with our different nationalities and political parties and every category and subdivision that we can think of, all of that is, in fact, illusion. And nothing unreal exists. That's from the summary of A Course in Miracles, which, again, let's go through that. Nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God. But the name of God is, in truth, your inheritance. It's your name. Now, the names are, of course, symbols. In truth, God has no name. Why? Because God is beyond all concepts, including language. So, who we really are cannot be labeled. It cannot be labeled nor even thought about with our logical, rational mind. It can only be directly experienced. And it's getting glimpses of that experience that really help us along the way, along the spiritual path. So, what do we do in the world? That's a great question. If you've asked yourself that, okay, well, I know all of these things are unreal, but we have to use them in the world. And you're quite right. We do. We do. Here's the way A Course in Miracles puts it, is you who are watching this video have a function as a teacher. Right? In the Course, they refer to it as a teacher of God, which is accurate, but you can call it by whatever name you want. You have a teaching function in this world, and you have answered the call, or you would not be watching this. There is a lot of other drivel that can be readily soaked up, absorbed, lapped up, sponged up on YouTube, isn't there? There's a lot of content out there, and that's the PG-13 version. Isn't it? I mean, it's the PG-13 version of all of this. There's a lot of content that you could be watching. So why? You're watching this right now. You've answered the call. You have a teaching function. So what does that mean? It means we need to, as teachers, whether you hold yourself out as a teacher or an instructor or anything like that or not, you still have a teaching function. We teach by demonstrating, don't we? Demonstrating our learning. That way we know we have it. So each of us has a teaching function. We need to use the words, the symbols, the tools that people in the world will recognize. We need to use things like people's given names that were given to them by their parents, or whether they had it changed by court order, or whatever that is. Whatever people call themselves, well, we need to use those terms that they call themselves. Every label someone puts on themselves, we use that, but without believing it. What I mean by that is we use people's given names in teaching. We use all of the symbols in the world while recognizing their unreality. And that's what I mean by not believing that it's real. We still must reach people. We must reach them skillfully. And I'll tell you what, there are people out there in the world that only you can reach. This is true. It's true. Your message, your presentation of spirituality will impact some people beyond any message that anyone else, myself or anyone, could ever deliver. This includes people that are well known for being spiritual practitioners and spiritual teachers. There are people out there right now that only you can reach. So each and every one of us owes it to all of those people, as well as ourselves, right, to not leave them floundering, as the Course puts it, to not leave them in hell. We have this function. So we use the words, we use the terms. I'm using them right now to reach you. You use them to reach other people. And how we continue to stay in the viewpoint, in Buddhism, we call it the view, how we continue to hold and practice the view and show up with the view, so to speak. And I don't mean the television show. I mean, we show up in the world, not of it. We use its terms to reach people, but what we're teaching them is that nothing real can be threatened. Nothing real exists. Herein lies the peace of God. How we maintain that link is our own spiritual practice. As teachers, we need to, have to, and must, right? There's no avoiding this in any way. We have to carve out some time for our own practice so that we can take a few moments, even if it's just a moment or so, to drop all of the worldly demands that are out there and reconnect with ourself, capital S, reconnect with God, reconnect with source energy, reconnect with your guides. Name the term. it's imperative that we return to ourself periodically, at least, so that we can continue to go back into the world and show up in the world and teach without believing the appearances, because they're not real. Now, we, in order to be effective, will most likely find ourselves in a position where we can't just say, oh, that's not real. Yeah, your suffering's not real. That electric bill, yeah, it's not real. You know, the divorce you're going through, whatever, it's not real. Well, you won't get very far with that, right? So we use what in Buddhism we refer to as skillful means. Yes, there's never been a term in spirituality that's made more sense to me than that. We show up and we're not an asshole, basically. We let people experience their lives, and we simply show up from a standpoint of showing them that there is a way out. And we do it in full faith that they can find the way out, because we can't do it for them. A lot of us make that mistake, right? We try to remove people's suffering with words or with our hands, and we can alleviate things temporarily. But everyone has to make this decision themselves that they want to seek a path to peace, that they want the peace of God. So we show up in the world from this standpoint of not believing the illusions, yet using them to demonstrate, frankly, that they're not real. And each of us has our own appointed way of doing that. Many of you watching this already know what that way is for you, and many of you are searching for that. Keep searching. You will find it. And of course, the name of God is your own. The reality is beyond all concepts, including words and names. However, let us accept the word God as our own here in the world. First, we accept that. This is about accepting the truth of what is. In fact, you could sum up not only this video, but all of the 200 plus videos on this channel right now, and there will be over 400 to 500 when we're all said and done here. Maybe it'll keep going up to 1,000 or more, but you can sum them all up in the summary of A Course in Miracles. Nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God. And you can also sum it up by saying our work, our role here is accepting what is. We remove and we remove and we remove again and again, as many times as we can and must, the barriers that we've erected to this awareness. We clear it out of the way. That's what spiritual practice is. That's what it's for. It's awakening to love. It's awakening to God, to the presence, to the living, breathing truth of who we really are. And this, in lesson 184, is a very, very powerful practice. It's a very, very powerful reminder that the name of God is, in fact, our inheritance. All right. So in practicing for today's idea, take as much time as you have and as much time as you can in just spending some quiet moments with God, with yourself, with your guides, with who you are, away from all of the constant chatter, away from the demands of the world, away from email, away from your Facebook feed, yes, away from YouTube. You can go back and watch me later and subscribe to the channel, yeah, because that's much appreciated. So you can do all that later. It's not going anywhere. And remember, when you go back and practice, whether it's meditation or yoga or just taking a couple of deep inhale and exhale breaths, what you're doing is you're giving yourself strength. You're checking back in with the source, and you're giving yourself strength to go out and demonstrate all of this to everyone that you will reach. And as the Course tells us, once you accept the call, these folks will start looking for you, all of them, and they will find you. So I thank you very much for your practice and for finding me. And if I can be of any assistance to you on your journey, I do hope that you will get in touch with me. Email is the best way. It's Tomas, Tomas, at tomasgarza.com. And feel welcome, of course, to subscribe to this YouTube channel right here, where I'm posting all of the videos here for A Course in Miracles 365, Awakening to Love. All right, everyone. Thank you so much, as always, for joining me.